In this video, we're going to talk about how to use the nerd in a college interview. The nerd is the ultimate archetype when it comes to interviews. And I'm going to tell you a bit of advice that every interview expert I've ever heard discuss this has said, whether it's about job interviews or college interviews. If you're interviewing for a job or for college, the questions you ask matter more than the answers you give. At the end of any interview, any college interview, the interviewer will usually ask something like, do you have any questions? And most people who don't know what they're doing will say, no, I don't really have any questions. Thinking that that makes them look more intelligent or something. It makes you look incurious. Curiosity, the hallmark of the nerd, is the most important tool in any college interview. How do you bring forth the nerd? You just ask questions. That's it. The questions do have to be of a specific type. They have to be questions that are based on the specific details of the interviewer's experience. They shouldn't be things that you can just find from a Google search or things that nobody in the world could answer. They should be questions that draw out the interviewer, that have him answer questions. Trust me on this. If you ask great questions, the interviewer is going to remember you far more than if you give any great answers. So let's talk about how to do that. The first place you do that is at the end. They ask you for questions, you ask questions. You can write down these questions. In fact, you should write down these questions beforehand. You should ask 2 or 3 questions at the end. It shouldn't be 50. It should be just about 2 or 3 to show that you're asking questions, but you're not acting socially abnormal. So what are some questions you can ask? You can say something like, what, if anything, would you change about the college? See, that draws the person into their own experience. Now, be warned that a lot of people will give the politically correct answer of finding a way to make it more affordable or getting rid of the financial burden or whatever, but at least it's something. Other people will give you a more interesting answer. Here's another question. You might say, what is something where you changed your mind about something in college? You might ask, did you end up majoring in what you thought you were going to major in? Those type of questions let you get a sense of the culture of the college. They're actually useful information. And they also let the interviewer feel a stronger sense of connection with you, the interviewee. So one place to ask questions is at the end. But you can actually ask questions throughout. Anytime you think of a way to bring in a question, you should bring that question in. So suppose the question is, what would you want to be doing in 10 years? You ask it, and then you say, if you had answered that question at the end of your college experience, did it turn out to be what actually happened for you? And that way you're asking a question about what happens to alumni of that college. The more you can work in questions, authentic, real, organic, curiosity-driven questions throughout the interview, the better. If you can only work them in at the end, it's totally fine. Take your time and really try to figure out some questions. Come up with your own several questions. Don't just rely on common questions or the questions that I mentioned here. Really think through clever questions. Those questions can really make an interview successful. Again, that brings forth the nerd archetype. If the person who's interviewing, part of his job is to say, is this a sociopath driven by self-interest or a nerd driven by genuine curiosity? If you're asking genuinely curious questions, you're going to showcase the nerd. You're going to answer that fundamental underlying subconscious question. Now here's the thing. Don't ask sociopath questions. Don't ask questions like, what should I do to help my chances of getting in? Don't ask questions like, what should I say on my essays to help get in? Don't ask questions like, if I get deferred, what should I do to get in? Those questions are just showing that you have self-interest. Guess what? So does everyone. It's not a way to stand out. It's not going to help you get in. Asking questions that are driven by curiosity is going to showcase the nerd, one of the most important archetypes in general, and the most important archetype for college interviews. Showcase the nerd through curiosity-driven questions. It's going to help you stand out and get in.